Good evening, everybody.
Kavod Harav, how are you?
Baruch Hashem.
Oh Hashem.
Okay. It looks like we're going to bet. So it says the Torah like this. משסרקים אותו, העומד במקומו לא יסרב כלל. So it says when we remove the guy, in case like this we talked about yesterday. So now, right, we're going to bring somebody else, obviously. So he says, right, that this new guy who's coming up, he shouldn't refuse, and be like shy boy, oh, I can't go. This is not the time to be shy now, to be bashful. You have to go up and do the job. So if they call you, just go right up and step right up. That's what he's trying to say. Okay, so so it says, even though in general, if somebody's asked to be the shliach tzibur, in general, he's supposed to be like a little bit bashful and refuse once or twice, this kind of thing. We already talked about this before, as he says, he mentions here. But here, in this case, it's not relevant to do something like that. So he says here, we're in the middle of the prayers, This is not the time to be bashful. So he says, now the question is, like, when the second guy comes up to take his place, where does he start from, right? So he's not going to start from the beginning because we're already in the middle. So therefore, he says, right, that he should start from the place where the person erred, that blessing, right? Do it again. Start from there and right, continue from there. So he says, if the mistake was in the first three blessings, then he has to go back to the beginning, right? Because there's no way to fix that up. What's the reason why? We already spoke about this before, that the first three blessings are considered to be like one, one unit. So therefore, once you mess up one of them, there's no way to fix it up anymore, So therefore, you gotta go back to the beginning. But that's only when we're talking about a case where he made a mistake and he finished the blessing, he sealed it, and so now you can't fix it. There's no way to fix it anymore. Okay.
Kabbalah, I thought this was only pertaining blessing number 12 of the heretics.
Yeah, good question. Yeah, good question. Why are we talking about the other blessings, right?
Well, you didn't.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. You mentioned yesterday that
Yeah.
if it was in the first three blessings where it's talking about the resurrection of the dead, we don't ask him to step down if the error was made there.
Right, but I guess here, like in this case, we're talking about what? That he can't correct himself, so there's he's got to step down. You know what I mean? There's no choice. I mean, the guy can't he can't get back to himself.
And
so what are we gonna do? Wait forever?
No. And how many attempts he's giving if he didn't make the mistake on blessing number 12?
Yeah. Oh, so the difference is like this, right? When it comes to that blessing, laminim b'lamashinim, we remove him right away, right? But here, in this case, we don't remove him right away. But if we see that he can't get it together, so we have to remove him. What else can we do?
Okay,
how long are you gonna wait?
I understand. Yes. Okay.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
That's what he's talking about. So depending on the situation, right, that we talked about yesterday. So now we're going to replace the guy. So he says, right, that number one, don't refuse. And also, right, where do you continue from? From that blessing that he made the mistake, from there. If it was in the first three, there's no, you can't fix it up. So you got to go back to the beginning. That's what we just said. What about the last three blessings? So there, right, if there was a mistake, he's going to have to start with Retzeh, which is the beginning of that series, right, of three blessings. Because why? Because here also the last three blessings are considered to be like one unit. So therefore, if you messed up one, you messed up everything. That's what we're saying. Okay, good. So then he goes on. So he says like this, right? That also the individual as well, right? If the individual has to return and pray again, repeat, correct it, whatever it is, shliach tzibur has the same rule. So whatever applies to the individual applies to shliach tzibur as well. That's what he's trying to say. בחוזר אם טעה כשמחזיר התפילה, חוץ מבראש חודש שחרית, שאם לא הזכיר יעלה ויבוא, אינו חוזר. So he says, but there are some differences also, right? What's the difference? That when it comes to Rosh Chodesh, he says, right, if the Chazan missed Yalev Yavo, he doesn't have to do it again. Why? So he says, we don't want to make the community wait too long, having to now pray again. They don't have time for that, right? So therefore, we excuse him. How can we do that? How can we excuse him like that? So the answer is because since everybody already prayed, individually, they fulfilled their obligation. So therefore, we say, okay, well, that's good enough. That's it, right? We'll leave it with that. So you see in these halachot, by the way, an important concept, which is that the rabbis were always concerned about the time factor, So, we don't want people like, just twiddling their thumbs, waiting and having to wait and stuff. It's not fair, to the people. It's, people have what to do, they have things to do in their life. So, you got to get moving, make sure you're on the ball. Otherwise, you're making a community wait, and it's not right to do that. What is that called in Hebrew? Tirchat tzibura, right? It's in Aramaic, right? That people are just being held up. You're holding up the community. It's not right to do that. So, the rabbis were always concerned about that. And here also, same thing, how long is it going to take to correct this, right? It's going to take 5 minutes, whatever. But 5 minutes is important to people, so you can't just make people wait like that. So you got to make sure that, you don't hold up the community. Rabbis were concerned about that very much. Okay, so that's that. I remember, one place that I used to pray here in this area, they did like, what we call in Hebrew, modern Hebrew, protexia, In other words, they gave them protection, there's some people. So, people like who were coming late, so he would call up the Gaba, and tell him to wait. For one guy, the whole community has to wait for him, what I mean? So he can say Kaddish for his, his great grandfather, I don't know, God knows what, right? Whatever it is, right? It's ridiculous, I mean, I would tell them, please stop with this stuff. Cut it out. It's like ridiculous, Whole community has to wait for one guy to say Kaddish. You can say Kaddish later also, there's 5 Kaddishim, what I mean? Okay, you missed one. What's the big deal? They don't understand these people. They don't get it. So it's like corruption in a sense. It's basically, corruption. They make for one person, they make everybody wait. It's not right to do that. Okay, so anyway, right, goes on. Katav, he says, look, he wrote Al Shem Alachot Gdolot, right? He writes in the Alachot Gdolot, Shegam b'tfilat HaMusaf, so he says that also in the Musaf, and Machazino Oto, we don't tell him to go back. In other words, the Shliach Tzibur, Yipnei Torach Tzibur, same thing, right? Same issue there. The Dafka, the Rosh Chodesh, so that's only Rosh Chodesh. But b'Shabbat, Yom Tov, it's as if it's Shabbat or Yom Tov, Machazin, we tell him to go back. So what does that mean? That let's say he prayed, right, the Shliach Tzibur, and he didn't mention Shabbat on Shabbat, or he didn't mention Yom Tov on Yom Tov. So that's more critical, I mean, that's more like the essence of the prayer, if you don't mention that, right, you really haven't fulfilled the obligation at all. So therefore, right, in a case like that, we say he has to go back and pray again. Because, here the mistake is too profound to just let it slide. But this rabbi holds no, even on Shabbat and Yom Tov, the same thing. Right? We don't go back. So he says that's the way it's more reasonable. So he says, you know why? Because what's the difference between Shabbat and Yom Tov and Rosh Chodesh? It's all the same. So why would you differentiate between one and the other? He also wrote that also in Musaf we don't go back. So he says also that doesn't make sense either. Why? Why is that? So he says the Gemara is only talking about Shachrit. Because Musaf is going to be later on, coming afterwards, right? It's on deck. But he says we're not going to now rely for Musaf to make it up at Mincha time, right? Which is far away from one to the other. Not really juxtaposed one to the other. So he says that's it. So says the Rambam that if he made a mistake, Shliach Tzibur, when he's praying silently, he doesn't have to really go back. But here also, we don't have the community waiting for him. That's the reason why. So what do we do, right? We rely on the fact that he's going to pray again anyway. So, he can fulfill his obligation on the second one. Okay. Very good. So he says, right, so therefore what he's going to do, he's going to rely on the prayer he's going to do later on out loud, repetition, and fix it up there. So So if he made a mistake with the one he did out loud, he should return. He said he should go back and do it again. Just like the individual. So we saw some separate, we saw some different opinions here, right, regarding this issue. So let's see in the Shulchan Aruch, right, what is the halacha, bottom line. First, we got to see the Bet Yosef. We did finish the tour, though. Okay, good. Let's go to Bet Yosef. So said Bet Yosef, right? What is the source for these halachot? Where is that brought down? Mishnah Pek, it's a Mishnah Pek and Omdin over there. All right, Lamed Dal Amud Aleph. However, it says, right, the person who goes to be the Chazan, I made a mistake. Yavor acher tachtav. As we said, right, somebody should come and take his place. So there you shouldn't be like shy and bashful. Where should he continue from? From the place where he made the mistake, right? From that blessing, from there and onwards. Okay. So says Bet Yosef more. Furthermore, that which he wrote, the Tal Shalosh Shalishonot, he made a mistake in first three, right? As we said, he's got to go back to the beginning. Pashut Cham, right? Says Bet Yosef, it's obvious, right? As we said, it's one package deal. You got to go back to the beginning. The Dasher Pek Tedvav B'Ilchot Tfilah says you should know that in the 15th pek of laws of Tfilah in the Rambam, Katvu Agot Maimoniot. It says over there Agot Maimoniot She'im Shliach Tzibur Kohen. Oh, if the Shliach Tzibur is a Kohen, the Oler Duchan, and he is going to do the priestly blessing, Lisad Kapav, to Tzarich Lizaher Shelo Yamod Acher Tachtav Liakrot. He says you have to be careful that somebody else shouldn't come and say those blessings, recite them. Lomar Sim Shalom, right? So he says somebody else should not come and take his place and say Sim Shalom, the last final blessing. Has to be somebody who was concentrating throughout the whole prayers. In Shliach Tzibur, with the Shliach Tzibur. Should be somebody who didn't talk when the Shliach Tzibur was praying. Interesting point he's making. Anyway, right, goes on to say, Misham Nilmod, so he says, from there we learn, so he says, that which we said, that the one who goes to pray for the Chazan, and he made a mistake, somebody else should come and take his place. He's going to start from blessing that he made a mistake. That's only if he was concentrating for the whole prayer. With the shliach tzibur. He didn't talk at the time shliach tzibur was praying. Yeah. But it says if not so, you don't have to start from the beginning. Oh boy, oh wow. But it says Bet Yosef, but there it's a little bit different. Why? That you can also fix it up by shliach tzibur doing the repetition beforehand. He does repetition before he does repetition. There should be somebody designated, to concentrate on all the prayer. Even if we don't find somebody like that who is concentrating on all the prayers, Yomar Shliach Tzibur Atzmo Sim Shalom. So then Shliach Tzibur himself should say Sim Shalom. Whereas if it happens that the Shliach Tzibur made a mistake, even if you don't find that he had concentration on the prayers. He only starts from the beginning of the blessing and finish Torah Chazibur because of the again, right? We have here a problem with the holding up the community. So he says this is more reasonable because if not so, otherwise, the right? The poskim wouldn't have refrained from saying this. In other words, this is the only rabbi we find that he says this, and the rest of them don't. So that implies that they don't really agree with it, even though they didn't really argue, but they didn't say it either. You know what he said. This is, by the way, one of the things, interesting things in halakha, which one needs to understand a little bit, which is that, let's say, you have a certain thing in halakha that was said by one rabbi, a certain point, a certain opinion, a certain whatever it is, some detail, but the other poskim did not state that detail, or didn't mention that point, or didn't mention that, this opinion, or whatever you want to call it. And so he's the only one who says it. The other poskim didn't really argue with what he said, but they didn't affirm it either. In other words, nobody else mentioned this point besides him. So the question is going to be asked regarding a case like this, which happens by the way quite often. This kind of thing. Do we accept that as halacha or not? So here, right, from what we're seeing here, the answer is no. That if we find one posek who said a certain point, the other ones didn't argue with him, but also did not affirm his idea. So from what we're saying over here in the Beit Yosef, apparently we don't paskin like that opinion. We don't need to. We don't need to be careful about that. Interesting. Okay, interesting point, right? Which is a very important point. So I'll tell you what happens, right? That in cases like this, usually what happens is that the Shulchan Aruch, if he brings down an opinion like this, which is only one rabbi said so, and the others didn't argue, but also they didn't affirm it either. So the Shulchan Aruch, what he does is he brings it down as, yesh mishi omer, like there is one that says like this, but then he doesn't bring anybody who argues with it. So it's like a dilemma, is it halakha? It's not halakha. According to Beit Yosef here, apparently it's not. But the truth is, I've seen in other books that say that it is. So we have to, kind of like reconcile this issue. Anyway, first of all, let's see Shulchan Aruch, right, what it says there. And then we can understand better where we're going. Yeah, so Shulchan Aruch says, Shliach Tzibur sheta'ah. Shliach Tzibur made a mistake. Ve'eno yodea lachazor linkomo. He doesn't know how to go back to his place, right? Which is what you asked about before, right? Why did we replace him? Because he's mixed up. He doesn't know what to do. Got confused. Yamod acher tachtav. So therefore, what we do is we bring somebody else in, right, to take his place. Kederech sheitber leil siman nun gimel. So he says this was already explained, this halacha, in chapter 53. Okay. So where does he start from, right? As we said, right? From that blessing, beginning of the blessing that he aired. This is only when we're talking about the middle blessings, right? But if we're talking about the first three, let's go back to the beginning, as we mentioned. But if it's in the last three, let's say you have to go back to let's say, right? As we said, because as we said, the first three and last three are like a series. They go together. It's one unit. So therefore, you gotta go back to the beginning of the whole unit. That's the way it works. Good. Okay, so that's the Shulchan Aruch. Let's see what else we got here. We have another Shulchan Aruch here. Yeah, but this Shulchan Aruch needs first Bet Yosef, because we did the tour on this, and we didn't do Bet Yosef. Let's see here. So it says Bet Yosef regarding this, right? What are we talking about here? We said, right, that just like the individual has to do, the Shliach Tzibur does the same thing when it comes to going back and paying again. So we said, one opinion was that only besides Rosh Chodesh. So it says Maran Bet Yosef. What's the source for this? I saw Pek Tfilat Shachar right over there in Brachot Lamed Amud Bet. Tanya it says over there Braita, right? Ta'ah velo izkir shel Rosh Chodesh. Let's say he made a mistake, didn't mention Rosh Chodesh, Shachrit or right, and Machzin Oto. So when it comes to Shachrit, he doesn't have to go back. I'm assuming he's talking about the Chazan, right? Because the individual does have to go back. Why is that? Because he still has Musaf, right? So he'll make it up over there. No big deal. I'm Rabbi Yochanan, right? He'll mention it there. Rabbi Yochanan says, but Tzibur Shanu, we're talking about communities, we said, right? The Chazan. Zohi Girsat Arif Ve'arosh. That's how it's written in the Rif and Rosh. כתבו דטעמה דבציבור אין מחזין אותו מפני תורך ציבור. So they both said, right, these rabbis, that the reason is because, the community, we don't want them to wait too long. We don't want to bother them. So therefore, we tell the Chazan, you have to go back and pray again. As we already mentioned. The Katav Rabbeinu Yonah says Rabbeinu Yonah regarding this, but Tzibur Shanu. So says we're talking about the community. כלומר, שליח ציבור שטעה, talking about a Chazan made a mistake. אין מחזירים, you don't tell them to go back, אותו מפני תורך הציבור, because of the community, right, they're waiting. כיוון דתפילת המוספים לפניו, because he still has מוסף in front of him, שיזכיר בעניין ראש חודש, because you mentioned ראש חודש over there. אבל יחיד מחזין אותו, but so when it comes to an individual, you tell him to go back. אין שהיה מתפלל בביתו יחידי, whether he was praying in his house by himself, then שהיה מתפלל עם הציבור or with the community. וכן פילה של רשב"א, also Rashba says that, okay? כתב הראש, says the Rosh, let's see how far this goes in. It's a little bit long. I don't think we'll finish it today. This the whole chapter ends with this. No, actually, there's a little bit more here. Anyway, it's a big one, so I'm not going to get into it today, the whole thing. But let's see, we can finish off here somewhere. Yeah. So says Rabbi Yonah, right? Rabbi Yonah, that as we said, right? Because people are waiting for this is the reason why we don't do it. כיוון דתפילת המוספים לפניו, שיזכיר בעניין ראש חודש, מוסף is also in front of him. He'll mention ראש חודש over there. אבל יחיד מחזין אותו. When it comes to individual, we go back. בין שהם מתפלל בביתו יחידי, whether it was in their house, as we said, we read this already. And he goes on, כן פילה של רשב"א, רשב"א says, כתב ראש, says the ראש, שאם לא הזכיר בתפילת המוספים, he didn't mention, right, the beginning of the Musaf, right? So then he has to go back, he says. Why? We don't remind on what we said in Shachrit, which was beforehand. Because we only rely on the prayer which is in front of it, right? Not already finished. Right? And not the prayer which we already prayed. It says also we don't rely on that which he's able to say, the mincha or mincha, כי דווקא שחרית ומוסף, it's only with the שחרית and musaf, שרגילים להתפלל כאחד, we're doing praying together, not together, I'm saying, but שחרית and musaf are like juxtaposed. להתפלל כאחד, אחד הוא, וסמכים על מתפילת תפילה, so then we rely on one, from one prayer to the other, אבל לא מתפילת מוסף לתפילת מנחה, אבל מה from מוסף למנחה? עד כאן השמות. That's the end of the Rashba. I'm sorry, that's the Rosh, I'm sorry. Rambam, it's also Rambam, שכתב בפרק י' מהלכות תפילה, says the Rambam also, כל מקום שיחיד חוזר, wherever the individual returns, מתפלל, prays again, שליח ציבור חוזר, שליח ציבור also has to go back again. מתפלל, אם טעה כמוהו, he made a mistake like him, בעת שמתפלל בקול רם. He's praying right the repetition. חוץ משחרית של ראש חודש. Except שחרית ראש חודש, שאם שכח של הציבור, if שליח ציבור made a mistake and we forgot it, ולא הזכיר יעלה דין משנה יעלה דין, עד שתשלים תפילתו until the finish of the prayers, אם מחזירים אותו, we don't tell them to go back in that case. מפני תורך ציבור. So he says, because you're making people wait, שערי תפילות המוספים, לפניו, because we also have מוסף in front of him, שהוא מזכיר בה ראש חודש, he's going to mention ראש חודש there. עד כאן, right? So that's the end of the Rambam. So we'll finish up this piece here. So it says, Ulapuke misfarim the garset. So it says, this comes to exclude, there are some books of the Rambam, right? Versions of the Rambam, texts of the Rambam, that have a different text a little bit. It says like this, Ta'ab Elo izkir Rosh Chodesh. You made a mistake and didn't mention Rosh Chodesh, but Shachrit and Shachrit, in Machzir, we don't tell them to go back. Because you can do it with Musaf. The Musafin, in Machzir, when it comes to Musaf, we don't tell them to go back. Because you can say it in Mincha. So, in other words, this Rambam seems to have an erroneous text over here. Because the truth is, we already said, right, that we don't link up the Musaf with the Mincha, it's too far apart in terms of the timing, So we don't say if you forgot it at Musaf, oh, don't worry, you'll make it up at Mincha. No, we don't say that. Only Shachrit and Musaf. Why is that? Because they're juxtaposed, one to the other. So therefore, right, it's just like, you missed it here, you got it there. That's the way he writes. Okay. So I guess we'll stop there. There's still a lot more. We'll do it next time, Bezrat Hashem. But regarding what we just mentioned before, you see that in the Shulchan Aruch he didn't bring down that opinion, that was said by an individual because the others did not say so. So you see, right, that in this case anyway, Maran held that this should not be the halakha, since it's an individual opinion, right? Single opinion against everybody else, even though the others didn't argue, but they also didn't affirm. But the truth is, as I told you before, right, beforehand, that there are many places where he does bring the Shulchan Aruch things like this, and he calls it Yesh Mishomer, right? There's one that says something like this, right? That's the way he writes it out. So now, right, it seems to solve our problem that I stated before, that I told you, right, there are some places where it is the halakha, according to some books. So the truth is, I've seen in the books of Maran, my rabbi, he writes that when a Shulchan Aruch writes something like that, an individual opinion, single opinion, right, which is not affirmed by anybody else, or also not negated, nobody argues with it. So we say, right, even though Shulchan Aruch says Yesh Mishomer, there is one that says blah blah blah. Right, so we say that is the halakha. That's what he writes, the rabbi. So what's the difference between that case and this case? Because in this case, he didn't write in the Shulchan Aruch this at all. He totally left it out, right? But in the other cases, he does write it. So now the question is why, right? Why is it that he writes it in other cases and not in this one? I guess he must hold, right? Obviously, it's pretty obvious that in those other cases, the case of that opinion is stronger. It's more, more weighty and relevant, right, to the whole discussion, as opposed to here, which is not really so strong. So he felt that this one was not so strong. He didn't mention it at all. In other places where he feels it's stronger, he does mention it, and therefore there, in places like that, it is the halakha. Okay, I hope I was clear about that, what I just told you. Okay, so Chazak Baruch, be blessed with wealth, health, happiness. Pray for the victory of Am Yisrael, of the Jewish people, against their enemies. All cockroaches will be eliminated. Don't worry, we have lots of insecticide. Don't worry, we'll get rid of all of them. So anyway, right, we have lots of spray. Don't worry, we got everything. So we'll see you tomorrow. Be holy and happy, and pray for us. And Bezrat Hashem, Laila Tov.
Shabbat Shalom, Kavod Harav.
All the best.
Thank you, Rabbi. Bye-bye.